Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series in our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug, and it's great to be here. We've got another fantastic interview for you today. We have New York Times bestselling author Caitlin Rother. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Caitlin?
Rother rhymes with author.
Rother with us.
Perfect.
And we are so happy to have you. As our viewers know, I often like to dig in a little bit to our backgrounds, or your background, I should say. So I want to ask you about your childhood.
Oh,
I was wondering if you feel that your childhood in some way contributed to you becoming an author. Were you an introverted child? Were you an extroverted child? Did you read a lot? Did you have imaginary friends? Tell us about it.
I was an only child, and my parents have PhDs in English. And so pretty much every wall in the living room and the dining room, any available wall was bookcases, either books or records. So I was brought up with a lot of music and a lot of books around me. And so, yes, I used to ride my bike to the public library. I would fill up my little backpack. I would make lists so I could check off every single book that I've read. And I read a lot of books. And I lay in bed and I just stay there and read. That's pretty much what I did.
Did you make up stories or have imaginary friends back then?
I did not have imaginary friends, but I did kind of talk. I talked to myself in voices, which probably was the sort of the same thing, like, doing characters, I guess, but talking to myself and back and forth.
That's awesome. So when did you decide to be a writer? Did you go to college to be a writer, or how did this all play out?
I was writing stories even when I was pretty young, but I didn't really think I was that good at it. So I was always a good writer in school, and I always got A's in writing. But when it came to trying to remember my first attempt really at creative writing, I took a class at Berkeley where I went to college, and I wrote a poem, and I wrote some short stories, and I really enjoyed it, but I just didn't think I could ever be as good as all these books that I was reading by, classics. I was reading books that I'd heard of that were, pretty big, famous authors from long ago,
Do you remember the first book you read? I mean, real book?
No, I don't remember the first one because there were so many, but I know that I read, for example, Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
I read that several times, actually. And every time you read that book, if you're at a different age, you will read a different book.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Wow.
it's kind of a children's book, but it really isn't.
No.
No, it's about
not.
all of the, rules in life that get messed up, and it's kind of and on the other side of the looking glass, whatever that second book is called, I read that one too. Anyway, he was one of my favorites, and I remember reading in college. I was reading Jerzy Kosinski. I don't know why I remember that. And I can't remember all the authors, but I would basically just go to the library and just pull books. And they were not first class. I mean, I had plenty to do, but I was still reading even in college. Before, and then I got into journalism. So yeah.
Was that your major, journalism, in college?
No, my major was psychology.
Okay, interesting. So did you ever practice in psychology, or how did you end up progressing into actually deciding, no, I'm gonna write a book?
Well, how do I say this? Had a family member who had depression, and that was, a couple family members actually. So it's sort of like, an anxiety in the family. So, and I had my own stuff to deal with. And so basically I got interested in that. But when I took my abnormal psychology class at Berkeley, I was basically like, I can't deal with these people every day. These people are like really seriously mentally ill. I said, I've got enough of my own issues. I don't think I can do it every day. But then as it turned out, years later, circling back, I was ending up writing about murderers who were mentally ill in prison. And so all that stuff really ended up taking root in here, and I still was interested in it. I just wasn't working with them personally every day in a session,
So what did you do right out of college? Did you immediately start writing books, or?
I had $100 in the bank and I needed a job. So I went to the job board at Berkeley and I found a job. And it was in corporate communications at a cruise line, which I hated, but I needed a job. So, and then I went to grad school in journalism and ended up working in newspapers for a long time.
Wow, okay. What newspapers did you work at? You were in the Bay Area, I take it.
No, it's really hard to get a job out of college in the Bay Area in anything. Honestly, it's like you have to leave and come back. So it was too hard. It was too expensive. So I went to grad school at Medill, which is at Northwestern and on the shores of Chicago. And after that, I ended up in the Washington program. And then I worked, had an internship at States News Service right out of grad school. And then I ended up on the East Coast for 4 years at newspapers in Massachusetts.
Got it. Got it.
And then I came back and I worked at the LA Times as a full-time freelance indentured slave. And then I worked at, which was an illegal situation, by the way, but I got some really good experience. And I went to the LA Daily News and I came down to the San Diego Union Tribune where I finished my career.
And that's when you jumped into writing a book.
No, I had been trying to write books since I was in Northampton, Massachusetts, working at a newspaper, but I was taking writing workshops and I was scribbling short stories until 2 a.m. I got the bug. So I had been working, my first book that I wrote was called Naked Addiction. It was the third book, I think, third or fourth book that I got published. But 17 years it took me to get that thing published. So I was working on writing a book and trying to get published for a very long time before I was able to get my first book published, which is Poison Love. And that was actually a nonfiction book. So,
I think that it's really good for our viewers, a lot of whom are aspiring writers, to know that that's pretty common. The path is, normally quite a few years before you actually publish your first.
Kind of like this, as opposed to this.
So true. So true. Tell us about your process. Are you a pantser? Are you an outliner? How do you write a book?
Well, okay. So my first book that I mentioned was fiction. Couldn't get it published probably because I didn't outline it, and probably because I kept rewriting the first 100 pages, which is my lesson to everyone: don't do that.
Right.
So I just kept reworking the first chapter, and then also, working on the first 100 pages. And years later, I ended up adding a brand new first chapter because I wasn't doing it right, And I can't tell you how many times I rewrote that book before it finally got published. And then I tried to write a series and I wrote another one and the publisher said, "Oh, you took too long to write this one, so we're going to reject it." I'm like, so anyway, that book I rewrote, I don't know how many times. My agent basically just said, "You're doing too much telling and not enough showing. Start over, do a clean file." So I did that. I went through 3 agents before I finally could find one who wanted to even send it out again. And that's the book that's coming out.
Oh my gosh, how cool is that?
17 years. But it's basically the new start of it's a start of a new series, because even though it has the same detective, I've added a female investigative reporter character, so it's a series of its own. And I'm calling Naked Addiction the prequel because it was so long ago and my character has changed a lot too. So as have I. So
great cover. I like that.
Beautiful.
Very visual.
Thank you.
So tell us about the premise of this book.
Okay, so it's a series. And I don't know if you have this other one, but I can show you the next one as well.
Ooh.
Staged is the sequel, which comes out in June. And so I don't give away too much in the first book, but it's going to be either a 3 or 4 book series. Hopefully, if the editor buys the next one, it's under submission. But this one starts out with surfing homicide detective Ken Goode, who is the detective from the prequel. And he is just this character who's been in my mind for so many years. I'm very much attached to him, but I came up with a new character because I wanted there to be a strong female character in there, since that seems to be such a great idea. I had a hard time getting 2 main characters into agents' heads that was an okay thing to do. but my editor really liked it, and I really thought it was a good idea. And so I just held on to that premise for a long, long time, even though it got rejected a number of times. I held on to it because I wanted that conflict and competition to be there, because you have homicide detectives and reporters generally are at odds. They are in competition. They are trying to withhold information from each other. They don't, detectives don't want their investigative information in public. We need to protect the integrity of the investigation. How many times have you heard that? And so that's real life. And so basically what happened is, when I wrote my very first novel, I didn't know anything really, because I hadn't really investigated any murder cases myself. But after now, I've written about a dozen true crime books, which are narrative nonfiction, and I've covered entire homicide cases, trials, which sometimes have 3 trials in one book. It's multiple suspects. I even wrote a book on the Manson case, which had 9 suspects and historical craziness to it. So after all that experience and all that knowledge, I now feel like I am even more comfortable with my detective character and his investigations, and what detectives do as a matter of protocol, and how they talk, how they think, what order they do things. But I also have the knowledge and personal experience of being an investigative reporter. So I have 2 characters that I feel really strong about, and I have a lot of information that I can pull from real life and my own experience to make them real. So basically, they meet in my bar, this favorite restaurant that I go to in La Jolla. That's where it's set, where I grew up in La Jolla. And he just got back from this gnarly surfing trip in Maui, where he was surfing these ginormous waves at a place on Maui called Jaws. And so he's just getting back, and he's having a martini, and he sits down to this woman, and they just start talking, and they immediately bond. They immediately are attracted to each other. And then he gets a call, and he goes, "I gotta go." So it's 2 bodies. So he's going to basically answer this call, 2 suspicious deaths. He doesn't know she's a reporter. So he's going to ask her out, gets her number, and then he has to go. And the next morning, he sees her with her notebook at the news conference, and he's like, "You're a reporter?" Because, you're not allowed to date each other. So that's the setup. Is you've got this you've got this tension, you've got this professional competition and conflict. So they're basically following each other. They're tracking each other's investigations. And the way it works is, detectives get access to certain information, and reporters get access to other information. So reporters get access to real people who don't want to talk to the cops. So if they're a good interviewer, they can get all kinds of information. So basically, the cops are learning from what she's publishing in the paper, and like, why didn't we get that? Why wouldn't they tell us that? And she's basically trying to get information from them, and they're trying to use her to further, certain aspects of their investigation if they get stuck politically. So I basically pull in the politics of being a detective, because, certain people they don't want to touch certain rich people who have money, they be careful of going after that person, so they both have their own issues. And the other thing about that I really feel strongly about and proud to write about is, I'm making this kind of a nostalgic look at old school journalism. So it's set in 2015 on purpose, because newsrooms still kind of existed back then, and maybe not the size that they were when I actually left in 2006, but there was still a newsroom. There was still that camaraderie. There was still a staff, and may not have been as big as it was. There were still those glass offices around the edges where you could watch the editors yell at each other. You could watch them in the conference room through the glass walls, and it was this fishbowl kind of thing. And the energy and the conflict and the yelling at each other, and the editors marching over and standing over you at your computer. Today, that's not happening. You got reporters who are working from home a lot of the time, remotely, and all that is gone. So this is a tribute and an homage, honestly, to ye old newsroom that I really miss.
Well, let me ask you this. So
Yes.
you went from an investigative reporter where you're trying to dig up all the nuggets and all the truth and try to tell the true story. And then you moved into narrative nonfiction, which is nonfiction with a lot of other stuff. And then you've moved on into pure fiction. Um, in your narrative nonfiction, how far off the reservation were you comfortable in going to tell your story? And then moving on, what's the difference in your approach to the narrative nonfiction and the pure fiction?
Okay, so when I used to teach, I would kind of explain to my students this way. You have journalism, you have narrative nonfiction,
Mhm.
and you have creative nonfiction. I did not go to the creative nonfiction
Okay.
side ever. Okay, so when
Okay.
I opened up in cold blood, I'm like, I'm not reading this. He just made this up. You know, I could tell immediately as a researcher myself, he did not have access to this information. He made it up. He could not have had access to this information. So I don't ever do that. So in my narrative nonfiction, my true crime books, I only write what someone told me or what I got out of an investigative document or out of the trial or out of my own observations. I never made a single thing up. So I did not get off the reservation.
Okay.
I did not interpret really things. I might ask questions, you know, but anyway, so and I wrote them as much, you know, like novels as I could. So I was using fiction storytelling techniques, but I was not making
Did
things.
you find moving over to pure fiction very freeing?
No,
In
I did,
respect,
and it's funny
or did it
because
scare you to get out on the end of the diving board?
earlier in my career, when I was still getting used to being an author and writing these narrative nonfiction books, I was still having trouble with the fiction because it wasn't true. And I
Right.
was so used to following the facts and following
Right.
a set story that I knew had happened. I didn't quite have that skill developed to plot something completely made up. But and even today, when I'm plotting these books, I'm a lot better at it. I'm a lot faster, but I still am running into, well, this has to be believable. This has to be true. Do I know this well enough to write about it? So I'll call someone up and ask, you know, start asking them questions and still do quite a bit of research. But I am finding it much more freeing that I
Yeah.
can make things up now because I feel more comfortable
Right.
with the narrative structure. And now that I've written the series, 4 books, and I'm actually starting a new one. And that one's kind of got me stuck a little bit because I'm chronologically having an issue with plot and point of view. And so it's a completely different set of
Yes.
challenges, but
Total
it's
different
fun.
skills. Yes.
It's fun. And I have like you said, the freedom to do
Yeah.
what I want with it. There's no rules. I mean, I'm
Well,
looking at books that are from best-selling authors and using them as guides and, you know, what did they do? But I don't have to follow what they did either. You know, it's
no.
not like there's
And
no.
you don't have to follow the truth, you know. Don't ever let the truth get in the way of a good story, you know. That's,
Well, one thing that I thought was really fun is I got to make up a sex drug.
oh
So
yeah,
Oh,
you can do that.
I mean, these two
yeah.
people who are found dead in these early chapters are two executives from a biotech company, and they're in development with this sexual enhancement drug, which I basically made up. It does not
Yeah,
exist.
it
I kind
will.
of wish that it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's chemically possible. It's like a Viagra
Yeah.
plus a psychological component that basically
Uh,
perpetuates that feeling of attraction and infatuation that you have when a relationship is very new. And then it perpetuates that. So
cool.
it's supposed to keep long-term relationships going and renewing the passion. But as it's turning out, you know, these people, these older men who've invested in it are actually really excited about the prospect of getting younger trophy wives and not sticking with their old,
Ah,
which comes later in the series. So
Very cool. So,
that's been a lot
Caitlin,
of
tell
fun.
us
Yeah.
how our viewers can learn more about you and where they can get your books.
My books are available online or at bookstores. If you're looking for the true crime, I've written Hooked is my 16th book. But the thing about this publisher, this is Thomas and Mercer. It's an Amazon publisher, and sadly, I can't get the books into bookstores because they have their
Warring.
individual
Yes.
prejudices about this which is too bad. So you can buy it online and buy it from Amazon. I will be doing some book signings and stuff, but it'll be consignment at bookstores, but I'll be doing them at libraries and stuff. So you can write me if you want a signed copy, but feel free to buy them online and go to a bookstore and ask them to order it. They can still order it. I just can't get them to stock quantities.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
That's.
And then do you have a website?
I do have a website, CaitlinRother.com, and I'm on every social media that you can think of. So I'm happy to engage and answer questions and all that.
Well, you're a great interview.
Thank
you so much
Thanks
for
for
being
having
here
me.
with us. It's really been fun, and we'll have to have you on with the next one.
That'd be great.
Out of that, yeah, for sure.
They are available now. These ARCs are available, and I have a whole 2 boxes of them to distribute. So please.
Okay. And Doug, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, Caitlin, thanks. It's always good to see you. I know we had you on
too.
Criminal Mischief back many, many months ago, and that was a hoot. And this is fun, and we absolutely want you back with the next book.
Great.
And until then, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a good job. We appreciate it, and we love having you here.
Great. Thank you so much.
So that wraps up this show here on the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series in our program, Get to Know. And as you know, we will be back with other interviews and fun stuff. So until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun, and try not to get caught.